Yeah, it's definitely been a while since my last review. I'm not actually quite sure if I still know how to do these, but talking about a long time. I know that my OnePlus 6 review is very late, but I'm not the one to blame for. OnePlus messed it up, otherwise my review would have been ready for the launch, but yeah, let's just forget that. But that actually has a good side with it, because my review is late. And therefore I took a little bit longer since I didn't really have a rush. I used it for about 2 weeks, which is about a week longer than I usually use those. And I will take all the time to cover everything here still, because it's a very important device for me. And it's actually one phone that I will be a little bit harder on than on some other ones, just because the OnePlus for me personally is a very important phone. So see it as kinda as tough love. And also one thing that I wanna cover in this review is, what is the OnePlus 6 and what isn't it? So let's just go into the first thing, design and build quality. Actually, it didn't change that much from the 5T. As you can see, in terms of length, not a huge difference. Also in terms of width, even though it feels a little bit thicker, it is pretty much the same. But I have to say, especially now with, at least on the Midnight Black version, with this really nice matte glass, it feels great. It's not quite as consistently grippy as the Sandstone White one, but it's definitely way better than the black version of the 5T. So I love the feel. It feels very premium, it feels high quality, nothing creaks at all. Buttons have a nice tactile feedback, they don't really wobble. A little bit on the alert slider, but the rest is done. Now, I'm still not the biggest fan of the position, because even though I have to say, just in terms of design, this is one of my favorite phones in terms of in-hand feel and even usability, even though it's not quite the narrowest one, I have to say, the buttons I'm not the biggest fan of, because I think still the power button is placed a little bit too high, and I still think that the volume rocker should be on the other side, but at least if you use it like this, it's not in the way while gaming. So I'm mostly okay with it, but that's mostly a personal preference. Also, along with the curves on the sides, it just makes it feel so nice, so comfortable, and so absolutely premium and great. And then I would say the only phone that pretty much feels a little bit more high-end or more premium would be the Xiaomi Mi Mix 2S, which doesn't have those curves, though it doesn't feel just quite as thin, even though this one feels a little bit thicker than the 5T does, but not in a bad way. Now, the camera, as you can see here, protrudes a little bit, but that actually comes with the benefit of, if you have it like this, the whole back is lifted a little bit, and it's a little bit less prone to scratch on the back, which I think is actually good, and it doesn't really wobble, so I'm totally fine with that. Now, the other thing on the back is the fingerprint reader, which, as you can maybe see here, has actually moved downwards a little bit, which I think is the better position, at least for me with my short fingers, because this is pretty much the most convenient direction for me. But I've noticed one thing, where on the 5T with the round one, I can sometimes still easily manage it with not completely touching it, and it still unlocks. This is not quite as possible here anymore. So even though the fingerprint reader is still super fast and super accurate, due to the shape, it doesn't quite act as reliable, but still we have the face unlock, which I think works still very conveniently fast enough. Okay, we know sometimes it can be tricked with a photograph, but anyone who has a photo of me, I don't think has my phone. Okay, otherwise, we have the mic here, we have dual SIM, and both are actually LTE capable, no SD card though, so that's why I would say definitely go for the 128GB version, also just because for the 2GB RAM extra. Now we have the headphone jack, yes, still have that, and the micro USB Type-C with the speaker. Unfortunately, there is still no dual speaker, and this one actually is a little bit of a disappointment. Now, I have to say the first thing, the notch. You can see it, especially in light, it's still visible, and in normal brighter situations I see the notch, but due to the option to hide it, I never in normal use bothered just a little bit about it. After using it for just 2 or 3 days, I didn't even think of it anymore. The first days I knew it was there, but even then it didn't bother me at all. So I'm just gonna say it's a non-issue for me. Now the side bezels, I would still wish to be a little bit smaller, because some phones like the G7 maybe got it already a little bit nicer, but that's just something else. We have, of course, buttons, and as you can see, the bezels on the top and bottom are quite nice. Otherwise, pretty much a flat front with a nice curve towards the sides. And that's pretty much it. I'm not quite sure what else to say about the design. The good thing is about the matte glass, it doesn't really attract any fingerprints. At least they're easily to wipe away. The black version that is glossy will be a little bit of a different thing. I would definitely prefer this one or the white one, I think. Of course, we still have the alert slider, this time on the left side, works good. But for me, actually, the highlight is now that we have a do not disturb button, so I can schedule my do not disturb, because I'm actually someone who doesn't really use the slider so much. But other than that, I think I've covered it, and that's why I want to go into the display. So when it comes to the display, we obviously have a very bright one. Actually, it's a little bit brighter than on the 5T, because there I measured 740 lux, where I measured 770 here. It's not quite the same as with an LCD display, but it is one of the brighter displays. Like I said, you can hide the notch, or don't. Then we have default. And that's actually the nice thing, even though not really necessary, but I always prefer it to have it, because we have sRGB, we have DCI-P3, we have adaptive mode, and we have custom color. And that is all great, and that's always why it gets a bonus from my side. But the important part is you don't actually have to use any of those, because I think out of the box as it is, already the calibration and pretty much everything else is spot on, because the viewing angles are very stable. The black, obviously due to AMOLED, is super dark. It's a very bright display. The white point is set well. Colors look nice. Don't really get distracted by the flashing. That's just an AMOLED thing. Usually you don't really see it in reality at all. And I have to say, it's still a pleasant display, because yes, I know so many people always complain about the fact that it's still a 1080p penta-matrix display. It's not the sharpest. We have already Quad HD and so forth and so on. But I have to say, yes, it is not the sharpest display. Therefore, it's just less battery consuming, which is a good thing. But in my time, and also pretty much since it is pretty much just as good as on the 5T, not really any better, if then maybe so little that I won't give it a star more or less. But in a half year of using this one, never I thought about, no, the screen could have been sharper or anything like that. I think it's a totally nice display, especially since the quality is very good. And that's, after all, I think more important than just the sharpness, because we have already seen Quad HD displays like on the HTC devices that are sharper, but they don't really have the qualities, especially with the with the dull screen or the colors being off and so on. So I'm super pleased, but not anymore with the speaker. So let's check that one here. Why am I shaking so much? Let me actually show you the same song on the 5T, just so you can see the difference, because I'm disappointed. Let's check. Okay, let's try it once again. And I don't think it's so obvious here in the studio. No, I don't think so, because the speaker is noticeably quieter than on the 5T. And I've said it already, this was an easy 4.5 star speaker, because it was one of the loudest ones and still with good quality. So pretty much the best bottom firing speaker. And that's obviously not the best direction, but this one, it's loud enough, but it's just noticeably not as loud. And for some reason here in the studio, maybe due to more absorbing here of my room, it's not quite as noticeable, but I'm disappointed, because just it's not as loud, and the quality also left a little bit. So it's a good 4 star, but not much more. About the headphone jack, what we have, even though I'm not here it is, the audio tuner. I can't really show it off, but you have an equalizer. It's not visible now anymore because I have no headphone jack, but I could actually plug one in just to show you. And then you have the equalizer with presets, and of course the type if you maybe have a OnePlus. And I have to say, it's still, even if not as good as, for example, something like on the G7 or V30, it is an above average headphone jack. It's louder, definitely easily good enough for IEMs, but also for a decent, if not super, maybe high demanding headphone. So still good, not performance. Let's kill all apps, and I know it's not quite killing, but let's see one thing. As you can see, apps launch quick, they load fast. And I have to say though, it's not, in terms of launch times and in terms of snappiness, better than any 835 phone. Where it shines a little bit, and that's the one difference that I definitely see over an 835, is the smoothness. It just feels a little bit more fluid, a little bit lighter. If you just are talking about speed, then it's not worth upgrading. If you want though a little bit more of a consistent device in terms of overall performance, the 845, even though it maybe doesn't have an impact on daily use, it is noticeable better. So if you want the best performing phone, go for an 845. But you don't have to go for this, because I also have to say that the 845 in the OnePlus 6 is not really running any better than on all the other 845 phones, like on the Mi Mix 2S, and I would say the Sony sometimes even feels a little bit more snappy. It does a great job. The only instance where I noticed some smaller lag is in YouTube when I scrolled slow, but I guess that's due to the autoplay when the videos just want to launch. But still, it is a top performer, and for games, obviously at some point it will throttle, which every 845 will just do. Because, yeah, that's just the nature. But then I also have to say that no game for the last 1 or 2 years has really pushed the limits of any phone. So you can play everything with that and still, even if throttled, without any issues. Now about the battery. A full charge takes 1 hour and 25, which is pretty much the same. And this is actually where I think they could improve a little bit more in some terms already, because we have quick charge since the OnePlus 3 already, if not even from the 2. So a little bit something more innovative would be good here. Now the great thing is you can charge and use the phone at the same time, which is something that I guess many people still do. I never did it, so I don't care about it not heating up extra. But the technique is pretty much the same, and now will be called warp charge soon, if that really makes a difference. But 1 hour 25 top, especially since it doesn't heat up. Now about the battery life, I noticed a little bit of an anomaly, even though I have to say that I didn't use this phone as my daily driver with the SIM in and doing the same stuff that I usually do, just because I was sick for the last 2 weeks, so I mostly used it on Wi-Fi. But usually what I've noticed with an 835 to an 845 phone is that an 845 had a little bit better battery life on data, but a little bit less on Wi-Fi. Here though, it seems a little bit different compared to the 5T, because with the 5T, if my old notes tell the truth, I got about 7.5 hours of screen on time on Wi-Fi, where I get like at least 8, if not even 9 hours. But on data, I got about 6 here, and I would say that's a little bit harder for me to tell. I would say like 5.5. So not a huge difference overall, still the same. It's not as good as an XZ2 from Sony, but it's still a solid 4-star, but it's not a 4.5-star just yet, because the standby drain and everything else is really good for an Android device, because I still think like 0.5% per hour, at least with my use, with my apps for some reason, is worse than I would like to, because I would like to have a fourth, maybe a percent per hour, but yeah, that's just that. Now, software. This is the launcher, the OnePlus launcher, and you can definitely absolutely use it. I personally still, since as long as Nova will be there, I will still use it. But of course you have the shelf and you have the quick settings, you have a few really nice little features. Now, especially like I said, the one thing that I really like is the option for the do not disturb mode. But we have, in terms of buttons, you can set long press actions, double press actions, you can swap. You can also of course use the full screen navigation, but I will tell you just this, I am not the biggest fan of those, because then you have to swipe and hold to get to the last app, and then once again. So I think the whole process of getting to the last app just takes too long, so I still stick with those buttons, even though very often while typing I hit home or the back button. But yeah, that's just pretty much normal these days with these 2x1 phones. I didn't really notice that so much on the 16x9s, but that's about the buttons and the controls. We have gestures. I still like the off-screen gestures, like for example to turn on the flashlight. It doesn't always work. I have to actually say that I've noticed, especially on YouTube, that the display isn't quite as responsive, because so many times I tap and want to see the time and it doesn't react. So maybe, as you can also see, oh yeah, I turned off actually double tap to wake, which is also a feature, but this isn't all that reliable. So the responsiveness feels a little bit weaker, even though I have to say for typing with SwiftKey even, I had no problems at all, because there everything got super quick. Of course, we have 3-finger screenshot. You can control your music with that, status bar options, for example. You can see you have the network speed, but due to the notch, it's not visible here. It is in landscape or if you pull down. Otherwise, you don't see the network speed. Of course, we can change the font. We can set the default home. Under display, we could change the theme. As you can see here, there is dark light. And actually one thing, ambient display. I like it a lot. Yes, I know it's not an always on display, but I actually prefer it over an always on display, because an always on display takes up more battery. It just uses a little bit more battery. But this, as soon as I have it in a normal angle, it turns on, I can see everything, and I still have the color notification LED. But usually if I just pick it up, hold it in a normal position, I see it already. If I put it down, it goes off. So I think this is still one of the best solutions, and it can turn on if you want to by any notification, so you can see it as well. So in terms of options, I am super pleased because it gives you the nice customization that I would like to see. And one bonus that we recently got is the feature, yeah, we could actually call it like that, that we now get 3 years, at least they promised that, of security updates and 2 years of updates. So, and usually they deliver quite fast. There should be actually an update coming today that should improve the camera, but I didn't really feel like waiting for that, especially since I don't think it will change so much about the cam, which we will talk about right now just real quick, because I still like the UI, because it's very minimalistic. You can quickly change, for example, the aspect ratio and also HDR. For example, in video, also quickly change the resolution, which is something where you usually have to go into deeper settings. We have 4K 60, 4K. Now, about that, I have to say, 4K 60 only uses optical stabilization, but not EIS. 4K uses EIS, and the same goes for 1080p, because 1080p 60 doesn't. I have to say, I'll get into that a little bit later. So let's check the pics. Now, from this distance, the selfie is not quite sharp, but that's normal because this is pretty much a distance that you need, and there it's in full sharpness up until this point, so all good, that's normal. Now I have to say white balance is fine, and I actually like the outcome, even though I have to say it could sometimes be a tad sharper, which is for some reason the weird thing is, especially if you look at the beard. It's a little bit blurry here. Maybe I was a little bit shaky, but I tried to keep it as steady as I did with the portrait mode. But here, as you can see, my beard got noticeably sharper. I still would say that it is a hit and miss, because you can see this is not blurred out where the rest is. So once again here, my beard is not quite sharp, or my face, and now it's sharper. With once again the portrait mode not being all that reliable. So that's something that they definitely can improve with software. And here once again, for some reason, with the portrait mode, my face gets sharper, and I've noticed this on every picture that I did with this mode. But still, therefore the portrait mode just doesn't work as it should. As you can see here, okay, but especially I think there was one picture, yeah, portrait mode, and now my shirt is blurry, but yeah, here it is blurry and here it is not. So that is something that they definitely have to work on. But otherwise I'm happy with this, as also in low light with the flash a little bit better, but it's just an on-screen flash. And then yeah, outside I have to say that I don't get quite the hype of this camera, because everyone says now it's a flagship camera, it's way better than before. But what I actually did is I made a comparison, and I took the same shots with the 5T, and even though I see sometimes a difference, I wouldn't even always say it's better. I still think, just as the 5T, that I think like these landscape footages, I would wish for a little bit of maybe one exposure level brighter. Sometimes the pictures just feel a little bit dull and lifeless. Then, as you can see here, green, especially now without HDR, and with HDR you can see that it then starts to clip in terms of colors. As you can see here, actually without HDR it seems sometimes better, as you can see here as well. So especially green is a little bit oversaturated, even though colors usually are really nice and realistic. But what I just recently noticed when I did a comparison with the BQ Aquarius X Pro that I'm just reviewing as well, colors between those two phones are vastly different, even though I would say that definitely the OnePlus has the better colors. But otherwise, sharpness is nice after all, definitely. And also here, it is still a very good camera, but I still wouldn't call it a flagship camera. Now, low light is actually quite nice, because here it turns out to make pictures nice and bright, so you don't really lose too much detail, and it's not grainy or it's too blurry or something like that. So better low light cam than many other phones. And yeah, portrait mode is available on the back cam as well as on the front cam. And here, for example, this was early in the morning, like 5 AM, and the pictures look absolutely okay without a flash, as you can see here. This is moderate. It's not great, but yeah, here with the flash, so use what you want. Now let's check the video. Starting off with 4K 60, and this is not the video that I wanted to start, but this one. So 4K 60, I would say what I've noticed, and it seems to be a general thing, I'm not quite 100% sure why, but 4K 60 sometimes has a little bit of some stutters for some reason. Maybe the camera heated up already since I was using it for a while, but still, this is something that I don't see on 4K 30 frames or on 1080p 60 or 30. So okay, I also have to say that this is using 120 Mbit, where for example 4K uses only 40 Mbit, so there is quite a difference. But I think the quality is nice. I think it actually seems way more natural with 4K 60 because it only uses EIS and the quality is great and you have more frames. But one thing that I'm not the biggest fan of, and I said this already so many times, once you switch to 4K 30, I don't know, but this looks so unnatural, this gimbal-like movement, and it always kind of during this movement feels very blurry. I mean, the quality is still nice with 4K, but I would actually go for a little bit more shakiness, but a way more natural feel. Or give me the option, like for example some other phones do, to turn off the stabilization, because I think this stabilization is way too much. And that's why you could also say, let me just take 1080p 60 like here, that's smoother, no stuttering, but therefore you will lose a little bit quality, because you definitely see a difference between 1080p 60. Now 1080p 30, that's actually front view, is also an option, but I would take 4K 60 in most situations if you have the space. Now as you can see here, front facing cam, I actually have to say that it looks a little bit unnatural in terms of my face. It kind of puts a little bit of a weird layer over it, which is something that I don't quite get, because it feels over sharpened as well, and the crop is way too heavy. You have to stretch your arm fully to get just your face in, because it uses EIS where it has to crop in, and I think it's just a little bit too much. So I've definitely seen better front facing cams. I actually am a little bit disappointed by it. Sound is okay, it's good, I would say 4 stars. Microphone, it's not the very best one, it could be a little bit richer the sound, but it's clean and it's okay. You can see also the video here inside. So it's maybe not without a selfie stick the best camera for vlogging or stuff like that. And you can see once it gets a little bit darker, it gets very grainy and very noisy, way more than some other phones. So I don't get quite the monster hype of this phone, but it is what it is. So let's I mean the camera mostly. So let's get into the point. What is this phone and what is it not? And therefore I have to compare it with the 5T, because what it is it is better than the 5T. But is it better than the 5T back when it was released? And here I would say no, because at its release point, I think the 5T was the better actual overall phone, just because of the speaker, which is a big part. It was annoying to hear this one just not being quite as good as on the 5T. But let's actually compare these two and let's see where they improved and where they didn't improve, and where I would say I would miss going back to the 5T features of the 6. In terms of design, I would like to have the 6 design, because the finish feels better, the fingerprint reader is a little bit nicer positioned, but the rest is pretty much the same. So overall, I wouldn't really miss it, but I would definitely know the benefits of the 6. In terms of the display, I wouldn't miss anything. This one is a little bit, so much of a little bit, better than that it doesn't make any sort of difference, and this is still fully pleasing for all those people who think different. Yeah, unless someone gives me a great quality display, I'm okay with these high quality 1080p displays. The next thing is the speaker. I definitely won't miss the one on the 6, because the one on the 5T is still better. Now the performance in daily use, it won't make a difference for most people, because the 5T is fast and every 835 phone is still fast. It's not quite as fluid as the OnePlus 6, but if you just want to use it normally, I would actually say there is no need from any 835 phone to switch to an 845, because after getting used to the performance of either one, you won't really feel like one is holding you back or the one is giving you so much more. Yes, 845 is my favorite and is the best performer because it's just so much more fluid, but I don't really need it. Battery, pretty much the same, so I won't miss it. Software, I won't miss anything besides the Do Not Disturb mode, which is schedulable here, which it is for some reason not on the 5T, but the software pretty much the same otherwise anyways. And then the camera. Selfie cam is a little bit better. Main cam is a little bit better. Video cam, actually I don't think so. So it is an overall better camera, but it's actually not that much. Especially when I did my side-by-side comparison, I thought, I don't know, everyone said the 5T back then didn't have the best camera, but now everyone says the 6 has a great camera. It has a very good, almost flagship-like camera, but I still would say it's not a flagship camera. There is still a distinctive difference between the really good ones. But I'm also the one that always said this camera, as well as on the 5T and on the 5, is more than good enough. Because if you would try to see the difference on a display of a phone or using Instagram, Twitter or whatever else, the difference is a joke. And then you could take any. And if you mostly consume your photos on your own displays instead of a calibrated monitor or anything else, I think the quality of cameras is usually completely overrated unless you need maybe better portrait modes or better video qualities and so on. So not the best cam, way better than it needs to be, but still it is more than fine. So I'm just gonna go out on this limb. If you have the 5T, switching to the 6 makes no sense at all. Because then just wait maybe for the 6T, which for some people, according to that, could come with wireless charging or something. And yeah, here I have to get into one thing: the price and the value. People say that this phone has great value. Personally, I don't see this so much anymore, especially since there are flagships with 800 or 900 euros or dollars that don't really cost that much anymore. For example, I can these days quite often already get an S9 for 500, which is actually cheaper than this one. And also an LG V30 I can get cheaper. An LG G7, I'm pretty sure in 1 or 2 months it will be also available in this price range. So back in the days when those flagships didn't lose so much of their value or their price so quickly as they did since last year, I would have said yes. But in times where the OnePlus gets more expensive every year and year, I expect them to get closer to the flagships, because if I'm honest, 1080p, I'm okay with it, but it could already be Quad HD. Bottom firing speaker could already be a dual speaker. I don't see a reason why not. The battery could be even bigger. Not that it's not good enough or anything like that, and the camera could get closer to a flagship. Because if you just see some specific points, for some people, something like an S9, even though the battery is noticeably worse, makes so much more sense, because you get the better display, you get the better speaker, you get almost as good as a performance, and you get the way better camera. So the days where the OnePlus 5T was the best phone in terms of values are, in my opinion, just gone. So either they have for the next 2 years keep the same price instead of bumping it up every time, or they just have to deliver the flagship features that other phones have, that many people of course always say I don't need this on a OnePlus 6, and I don't need many other, because I don't care about quick charging and I don't care about a better camera or something like that. But still, for many people those features are important, and you can get these for the same price as this one here. So if people just take a look, $900 of the S9 or $900 of the HTC U12 Plus and so on, you can't really see this as this like anymore if you just see it from the release, because the big difference is the OnePlus 6 won't get cheaper unless you maybe get it from Gearbest or somewhere else where they are just cheaper. Otherwise, the price will stay like this until the 6T comes out. But an Samsung, an HTC, an LG or whatever else will drop in price quite dramatically. So I have to say, as big as of a fan I am of the OnePlus 5, just because I like the performance, I like their in-hand feel, I like the design, and especially I like their software with the overall rounded package, I have to say, by these days I would have expected more, and the jump from a 5T to a 6 isn't actually that big, especially since you now also have the notch. And I think OnePlus should do one thing: they should get back to their roots, do something unique, go something more into, for example, of an niche device again, and do things on their own, because let's just see what it is. They didn't improve the speaker for years, or I mean the technique. They just copied what everyone else did with the notch and all those kind of things. Deliver me something unique, because these days where we can get so many flagships with so many high-end features that are also good, because the thing is, 2 years ago pretty much every flagship was still flawed, and then a great all-rounder like the OnePlus at this time was, at this price point, something you didn't get. But these days flagships are way more mature, way more well-rounded, that if you are just well-rounded, it is not good enough anymore. You have to deliver, because the OnePlus 6 isn't top of its class in any category. It's not in terms of build quality the best, not in terms of display, in terms of performance it's up there, but it's not really better than anything else. In terms of battery life, it's not. Software for me, yes, but that's the only thing where I could say it's better than the rest. But if that's enough of a reason just to switch for it. So, would I take the 6 over the 5T? Yes. But since I have the 5T, I'm definitely not going to go for the 6. I will rather wait maybe for the 6T, maybe for the 7, because like I said in like a while ago already, no need to switch from an 845 device. From an 820 device, yes, otherwise not. And I know this review was way longer than it usually is, and I talked way longer and way more inefficient, but it doesn't matter, because I'm pretty sure you got all the information, and if you didn't, the comments are still there, and I still read all of them, even though some annoy me from time to time. But that's it. I wish you a nice day. Until next time, bye.